Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today's video is repotting, and we're going to do 3 orchids. They are Miltonias, which are part of the Oncidium alliance, and as such anything I say about Miltonias you could apply to most of the other members of the Oncidium alliance that are up the warmer grower end, not the cooler ones, not the sort of odontoglossum end, the warmer end, those that come from the more tropical jungles rather than the cloud forests, if you know what I mean. Although if you're looking at species level of any of the Oncidium types, you should always do a bit of research on the plant itself, because it might appear to be a warmer grower and then you find out that it actually grows at quite high elevations and turns into a cooler grower, even though it's in like a set of plants that you assume are warmer growers. So always check. And if it's an intergeneric combination of various members of the Oncidium alliance, then you'll just literally have to go down the middle somewhere, and it would obviously be a hybrid if it's if it's an intergeneric. You can try and trace it back, if you've got a name, to the individual plants that went into its makeup, and then do some research on those and try and average it, because you will sometimes come across an intermediate grower quite happy in that arena, and then one that's up the warmer end, and then you'll come across a cool to cold grower that's been mixed in. You think, well, what am I supposed to do with that then? Down the middle. So it's the best you can do, isn't it? And sometimes it's trial and error, because you might apply a temperature range and even light level and find it's not working and the plant's just not growing very well. Well, move it then. Try something else. Anyway, we've got 3 to do today. They're all getting repotted for exactly the same reason. The reason being, when they were potted up, I used some of the Welsh moss, which at the time seemed like a good idea. And in some cases it was a good idea, but longer term it wasn't. It's a very, very coarse structured moss. So it doesn't compact. It's pretty good. It worked well on mounts for a while. Why did it suddenly stop working? We got to winter time. What happens to a lot of mounted orchids, especially dendrobiums, in the winter? They have periods of dryness. What happens to the moss if it gets dry? It dies. And unfortunately it doesn't resurrect from the dead. And once it dies, it seems to have a pretty adverse effect on roots. So these 3 have got Welsh moss in their pots, and I want it out. So although they haven't, they wouldn't normally be due for a repot yet, perhaps, if they'd gone in a different media, they are now because of that moss, which has died over the winter. So let's get going. Okay, I've put the camera on the table tripod so that I can get in relatively close. Paraphernalia, my tray obviously, that keeps the mess in one place most of the time. Doesn't keep the bark out of my coffee though. Coffee, essential part. I have my scissors in rubbing alcohol, 70%. That is, I put my scissors away sterilised, so if I've got a quick job to do, I know that they're clean. I'm working with 3 separate plants here today, so in between the plants, if there's any cutting to do, we can re-sterilise the scissors. That's the plan. And then over here we have our jug. This is a new idea, and I'll state now, I have no evidence that this does any good whatsoever. But there is science behind the fact that it can't do any harm. There's a difference between evidence, hearsay, advice and guidance, and science, the actual facts. So effectively this is some RO water with some nice organic seaweed extract. Now the stuff that's in there that's probably going to do some good, there's amino acids in there, auxins, various things that allegedly, some say, it is written, help a plant get over the shock of a repot and root disturbance and all that sort of stuff. And there's elements in there that just help the plant settle down and get back into growing quicker than it would do without. I can't prove that one way or the other, but many people have said that their plants get going quicker with the use of this after repotting. Now I've gone a little bit further than that, that's why the jug's here. So what I do is I try and avoid touching the roots as best I can, and then once I've got the worst of the media off, the plant goes in there and I give it a shake and work at it, and most of the old media will come off as part of that soak, yeah? And while it's soaking, it's going to take on board that. So that's why the jug's there, and we'll get that well away from my coffee. Get it out there. It's probably going to make a mess. In fact, let's be sensible here and put a bit of kitchen towel down, and then any drips and everything can be soaked up. Say clearing it up. There we go. Right, so what have we got then? We've got this one, which is Miltonia Sunset. Now in my playlists you will find a playlist about Miltonia Sunset with Fusarium. This is still the same plant. It's still growing, it's still okay, but it's been set back by the death of the Welsh moss in the pot. Now I was a bit silly and watered all these yesterday. Well, I didn't know I was planning on doing this today. Sort of last minute decision. So this is the first one. This has got grow stones in it, as well as bark and the Welsh moss. Doesn't seem to have too much Welsh moss in it, but it's got enough that it's not doing the roots any good. Now this plant has not got good roots. This is not a well-rooted plant, but it is coming back into growth now, and it has 2 new growths on it and 2 previous new growths. It also has a rhizome that I would like off. So you can see I didn't do much fiddling around with the roots. I'm just going to get the sheaths off. You know, they can hinder roots getting down into media, so it's always worth just flicking those off. Probably be working on pseudobulbs I'm going to cut off in a minute. But we'll get it tidy looking first. Well, some of those don't want to let go. Yeah, that's as far as I'll go. Now we've got 2 old bulbs here. Scissors. The very oldest one is where the whole plant has come from, so that's coming off. Now we've got to look at the next one. Now we've got 2 plants, and I do remember that this was 2 plants. Now this little bulb on the back here is actually plump and is capable of storing nutrients and hydration and can help support the plant. The next bulb that grew is not very big. It gained its height, but it didn't plump up as much as it should have done as a new growth did. However, the one following on was a bit better, and we now have a new one growing with roots with some active tips. So that can be planted as is. Wonderful. So that's one in to soak. Now what are we going to do with this little piece? Again, the back bulb, the back bulb can come off. It's all shriveled, so we'll remove that and the stump it left behind. Then that leaves us with a rather shriveled bulb, but it's got a leaf, and another bulb that's not plumped up as much as it should, but it has leaves, and our new growth, which has new roots coming out. Now there's just a few of these roots were part of the old bulb. They should just loosely tease off. Otherwise, the roots are attached to the plant. That's it. That's all that's getting. So that's those two done. Give it a shake. Loose roots, loose debris and everything will just come off. So that's the first one done. That was Miltonia Sunset, it says on the tag. Strictly speaking, it is Miltonia, because basically there's a Miltoniopsis brought into that cross. So the original Miltonia Sunset, if you look that up properly, somewhere like Orchid Roots, you will find the original components that went into it, and you'll see the bloom on the original Miltonia Sunset. The new cross that had a Miltoniopsis added in, which is Miltonia, gets complicated, doesn't it? Especially when you haven't had enough coffee. If you look that up, there are more plants involved in the cross, and the bloom is different. Now, from my pictures of my blooms, that's what mine is. So when I do a new label for this, rather than this manky old one that I've got a job to read, I will actually correct the name to Miltonia Sunset, which is what it actually is. Right, so that's that one. Next one. Now this one is Miltonia Summer Glory. I'm not sure what I'm going to expect in here, but it is just coming back into growth. Again, no decent roots here. Now what we've got here is the genuine article. That's the oldest bulb. It grew a new growth. It pushed out 2 leads, 1, 2. That one's carried on growing and pushed up a new very, very weak growth, and that now has a new growth. The other lead went off in the other direction. Very poor pseudo bulb, no leaves, and then another new bulb with a new growth coming out. And basically that has all the hallmarks of, there is no point in keeping bulbs like this on a plant when you repot. It's shriveled to such an extent there can't possibly be much storage left in that. So all it is in the way. This is a rotting pseudo bulb anyway, so that would have to come off. So I'm going to be drastic with this one and take this down to the single bulb and the new growth, which is quite drastic. So I'm going to take that off there. Same again here, I'm working on the same plant so we don't have to sterilise in between. I'll take that back to there. So what have we got then? What we've got here is a shriveled bulb. It's got some leaves, they're not very good, they've got marks on them. I personally don't worry too much about spots and things on Oncidium type leaves. They just seem to appear. They don't seem to do the plant any harm. Right, we've got stumps of roots here that with some hydration could start to grow, and this little new growth will eventually push some roots out. So that's that one. This one is effectively identical once I get the sheath out of the way. It's a pretty shriveled bulb that's got leaves. These leaves are a bit cleaner on this one. They're not bad, but they're smaller. It's a shriveled bulb, so it's not going to store much. And again, it has a new growth and it has some stumps. That's going to take, both of those are going to take a bit of getting going. They might go in a different media as a consequence. So get that one into soak. Right, that's the first two little ones. Now we've got a big one that isn't, it's actually pieces, and this one will not grow. Now this is actually a Miltonia species, and it is Reginellii. It's classed as intermediate according to Burnham's. I would say it would prefer to be a bit warmer than 12 degrees in the winter time, but a lot of Miltonias have a trait that doesn't match up with a lot of the other Oncidium types in the alliance, because many of them stop growing in the winter as a result of the lowered temperatures and the much shorter days. Those shorter days have an effect, yeah? In the wild, you know, and don't forget the species come into the hybrids and bring their traits with them. They come from a place where they don't get short days and they don't necessarily get dull winters, yeah? But they do get cooler temperatures, and many of them just stop growing in the UK because the day lengths are so short. And if they're not growing, what don't we do? We don't feed them. So Miltonias, unless you've got special conditions where you actually got extended day lengths and reasonable temperatures, yours will probably keep growing as they might do in the wild to a degree. But if you're going to make them put up with the really short days and the duller light, you know, we get a lot of rain and dull weather in the winter in the UK, they're just going to stop growing basically. So it pays not to feed them. Now, when this was potted up, it was lots of pieces, and it warranted a pot to allow for the new growths to grow across the surface. Well, it didn't happen. So this pot is miles too big for these pieces. But we'll take them out and see what we've got. Do you know, I wonder why. Now I did repot this, I'm sure. This isn't Burnham's. I must have used the polystyrene pieces that were in the pot when it came from Burnham's. I must have reused them, but I don't normally use the polystyrene pieces. Right, so what first thing we need to do is separate this out and see what we've got. I know it went in there as pieces, so obviously it's going to come out as pieces. Now, have we got anything worth saving on this piece? I want at least one of these to grow on. I'm not interested necessarily in keeping all of them. It's a climber. The latest new growth on this piece here has not produced any roots. So I may not keep that piece. We'll chuck it over there for now till we decide. And then this piece, now this piece has got a new growth. And I suspect, yeah, there's two pieces there. One's dead as a door now. The other one has pieces hanging off the back. This piece here is a rather weak bulb, but it has got leaves. It does have a new growth and there are roots growing. So that piece is worth keeping to grow on. And we'll cut that there. So a few sheaths to take off just to clean it up, tidy it, allow for the new roots to come out. You can see the little new roots just there, just starting. So this one will grow, providing it's given a suitable media. So we'll pop that in there. What else have we got then? We've got another one here that's got a new growth, that's got a back end. Yeah, now this one's a bit different. The growth behind the new growth, the bulb there, is weak, but it's got leaves on. The bulb behind that has got leaves on and is reasonably plump, so I'm going to keep it. That one not. So we'll take that off there. So this one will be a slightly larger plant to grow on. Take that off there. I was just going to say, and that'll probably be most of the roots gone. They would old dead roots, we don't worry about those. Clean the sheaths off. This is a habit I've got, and it goes back to the days when many of my plants had scale. Now those days are virtually gone now. There's only a couple of plants that have still got a few, and I treat them every time I look at them basically. Right, so this little new growth here, these roots on the oldest part of the plant are not actually viable, so I'm just going to take them off. They're dead roots on the oldest part of the plant, so we'll snip those, and these. That'll do. And then what we've got is a little plant to get potted up. New roots will be coming out of this new growth very soon, and hopefully it will now grow on, given a suitable media. Right, so that's what's being kept. That's what we will now work on. No, it's not worth keeping that. There's no sign of new growth there. No, it's not worth it. We've got two pieces. It's not worth it. Right, so I will have a tidy up. Let me have a look at my battery. Oh, it's still okay, I think. And sort out what media I'm going to use for each of these, and find some suitable pots. And as I always say, I'll be back. Right, strictly speaking with repotting, the hard work's done. The easy bit is the actual potting, cleaning up the plants, choosing what you're going to keep and what you're not, tidying roots. That's really what takes the time. Now in here is pre-mixed leftovers, so this is small bark, perlite and some broken up sphagnum moss. I use this sphagnum moss for those that are interested, mainly because I can get it at a reasonable price and I don't pay postage because I can get it direct from Orchid Accessories, Peter White, at a show. He'll bring it along on request, so you know, that bale will last me what I did last year and probably everything I need to do this year. You have to stop and think with media. You sort of look at a bag of bark and think, ooh, 20 quid for a bag of bark? How many plants are you going to repot? How much did you pay for your latest orchid? And your bag of bark costs less than one orchid. So don't begrudge the pennies. Get good media. Don't get the cheap rubbish. It's not a saving. Think of the cost of your orchids that you are relying on this media to work well for. Right, now these two over this side, they were the first two that we did. These have no effective roots. They don't have a lot of backup in the bulbs, so hopefully they're going to grow relatively quickly. To enable them to do that, they're going in the smallest pot I've got. I'm going to put some bark and perlite in the bottom of that pot, so that if the roots do start to grow, they can become acclimatized to the media that they will go in next time. But to get them to grow, they're going to go in sphagnum moss. So the top of this pot is going to be just sphagnum moss. I'm just squeezing the water out so that I can handle it. So I squeeze the water out, that compacts it and compresses it, and then what we do is we fluff it up so that it's not all compacted. That puts the air back in it basically so that it's not compacted. We need it compact enough that those roots are touching it and they know it's there, so not too airy, but not so compact that it keeps the base of the rhizome absolutely wringing wet and soggy. Too much. So a bit in there, that I will poke down a little bit, so it's not compacted, but it's sitting reasonably well. Now both of these are going to go in the same pot, and they will go like that, so that the two new growths can go into the middle of the pot. Now they're not going to sit there, they're going to flop about, aren't they? So I'm going to put a bit more. But the bit more that I'm putting is fluffy. And I'm hoping that it will hold these in place, and if it doesn't I will get a stake. But they're so light that I think that will be enough to just hold them in place. And I'm expecting roots to get going on these. Yep, see, that's holding them in place. So there we go, that one's a bit deep, needs to come up a bit, so that the base of the new growth is right on the surface. They are leaning back slightly, which is helping hold them stable. So that was the first one we did, that's Miltonia Summer Glory. The story behind that was I organised a coach trip when I was still at Bournemouth Orchid Society to take people to Ridlington, the Ridlington School Orchid Project, on their open day, and that was bought for me by a good friend at the time as a present for, you know, enabling people to go that wouldn't have been able to go otherwise by sorting the minibus out. So that's what was behind that. Now these two are the Miltonia Sunset. Again, small enough that they can go in the same pot, not very good roots, but signs of new roots growing on new growths, which will grow on relatively quickly. So again, I'm going to do the same thing with that. I'm just going to put some bark and perlite in the bottom of the pot for those roots to get into once they get going. And then we'll put a base moss reasonably firm for those roots to get into, so that they can feel secure. So this isn't quite so airy fairy and light and fluffy, this does get compressed slightly. Now these two are quite a bit taller, so they may not stay upright. But again, look at where your new growth is and look at where it's going to go in the pot. Now that one has got an extra bulb on the back, so that can go right up against the back of the pot and tip over at an angle so that the new growth is towards the middle, and the other one can go a bit nearer the middle. And then we will try holding them still with some moss, which may or may not work. But again, we need the fluffy moss at this point, so just squeeze the water out and fluff it up a bit, so that it's not all compacted and squashed up. And then just tuck that round like that. I've just realised my hand is probably in the way and you can't see what I'm doing. And I can't help it, I'm right-handed. I suppose we could think about putting the camera the other side next time, so that it's looking over my right hand. I will consider that for next time. It's too late for this time. Yep, they are going to stay upright, so some sort of fluffier moss, just holding them in place. That one needs some round the back to keep it away from the edge of the pot. Like that. So there we go, new growths again, on the surface, not sunk in too far. With fresh moss like this, it's unlikely to generate rot. So that's two done. Now we've got the two bigger pieces. I'm still going to put them in one pot, so they are going to be quite tight in that pot. I'll put all the bulbs together in the middle, the two new growths on the outside, so they will be quite close to the edge of the pot. They've got roots growing, so we should be able to observe those going down the side of the pot. Right, so now this is a bit different. I will still put some in the base. It's a form of crocking, but not really. And then what the plant's going to get planted in is a bit different, because it will get the bark and perlite with some chopped up moss, but it will get some extra moss to try and encourage these roots to grow. So we'll just break up a bit more and make the moss a bit dense. Not heavy on the moss to that extent. I would only do that if I had better roots showing, you know. The problem is, you see, if you haven't got a very good root system, this moss is going to stay wet, because the roots are not going to absorb anything from the moss. The only way it's going to dry out is evaporation, and that can be quite slow. We've still got quite cool temperatures, so I don't want too much moss. Right, let's see what we can do with that then. Now, if you've got roots that don't seem to want to go in the pot, just turn the pot and they will twist in. And the idea is to get the plant at the height you want it, and then hold it there and add the media. My theory is always down one side, 180 degrees down that side, 90 degrees down that side, and 90 degrees down the last side. So you've come at it from 4 sides. That way you won't have any gaps. There was no point in doing this on the other 2 plants, was there? There wasn't any roots to get the media in between, whereas on here there are a few. So we just want to make sure that this media fills the gaps. Right, so how are we doing then? New growth, new roots near the surface, a bit of extra moss around the base of that new growth. Same round here, a bit of extra moss around the base of that new growth. Keep that area of the media more hydrated to encourage those nice little roots to grow. That doesn't need staking either, so we've done very well there, because all 3 didn't need staking. Now this moss that's left over in the dish, I will take it out, give it a good squeeze, put it back with this media, which will go back in the bag ready for next time. Now, a lot of people disagreed with this last time round, because they said there is a possibility of cross-contamination. And yes, I'll agree, there is a possibility. But for that to happen, there has to have been some contamination in the first place. Yeah? And I've been watering water through a pot, catching it, using it again to a degree over 5 or 6 pots before I put some fresh in, for about 10 years now. And has all my orchid collection keeled over? No. But nonetheless, there is a remote chance. But what I was going to say is, I will now use this nice seaweedy water to water these plants in, so that the media has still got the seaweed in it, and hopefully it will still be okay as these roots start to grow. So the first watering will be using this up. So there we go. That's the I've forgotten. I think that was the Regnellii, wasn't it? Yeah, probably. And then we had one of these 2 was the Miltonia Sunset, and the other one was Miltonia Summer Glory. I will now get some nice shiny new tags with my machine and get those labelled up, update my notes to say when they were repotted and what they were repotted with and what I actually repotted, i.e. 2 plants in the same pot, that sort of thing. That's the sort of notes I keep. I don't go mad. But I think these 3 should now start to grow much better than they would have done if they'd been left alone where they were. And that's 3 off my list. And they all got done for the same reason. They had the Welsh moss in the pot that had died and was starting to basically ruin the root system and the rest of the media that was in there. So there we go. Another kitchen time session using my new principles of seaweed, giving them a soak, not messing with the roots too much. I handled those roots hardly at all, so I'm not bashing them around and bruising them and all that sort of stuff. Not quite so important with finer root systems like these were, but nonetheless it's a habit that I want to get into, and we've started, so we will continue. Okay, just tagged on the end, all your selections that were done in the previous Sunday chat, not the one just gone, the one before, in the comments. I've now typed all those in. We have the, I'll say 3, but I mean 4 top categories, one of which was Derek's plants, and that one's already been done. So that was the previous video, looking at Derek's plants. The top orchids, there will be 15, 3 sets of 5. There might be some surprises in there. There might be some surprises, but they've all been identified now. So the first video of the top 5 that you selected, spotlight on each, 5 minutes or so, 30-minute-ish video on the 5 top selected orchids by yourselves, coming soon. Keep your eye out. I won't say tomorrow, but coming soon. This week, sometime. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.